Welcome to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to educating and empowering men to address erectile dysfunction, improve confidence, and enhance the satisfaction in their relationships. This podcast is brought to you by ErectionIQ.com. Learn more at ErectionIQ.com.
Welcome to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. I am Mark Goldberg, certified sex therapist. I am deeply passionate about working with men like you to help resolve their ED.
Welcome back to Erectile Dysfunction Radio. I am Casey, your podcast producer here at ED Radio, and I'm happy to join Mark for today's episode about sex in the pandemic, how to emerge stronger. Mark, as a sex therapist, how would you coach someone who is dealing with anxiety related to the pandemic, and perhaps that anxiety is impacting their sexual performances?
So, Casey, that's a good question. As a therapist trying to help somebody struggling with anxiety relating to the pandemic, I want to understand what their baseline understanding of the world was before the pandemic, how that's been disrupted, and what are some of the steps that can be taken, whether that is emotionally or cognitively, to help them return to some sense of stability and understanding about the world around them.
Can you remind us about what anxiety related to reacclimating to this new post-pandemic world? Of course, we're not quite there yet, but we're hopefully getting close. So just tell us a little bit about that episode that we recently had about emerging from a pandemic and how it kind of relates to today's topic.
So emerging from a pandemic or any life transition can bring a slew of challenges. Many people will be facing a world that's new, a world that they haven't seen before, and that requires adjustment. It could be anxiety-provoking. For other people, they had successfully learned how to manage anxiety and had made strides prior to the pandemic. Due to various reasons, the pandemic itself, or the social isolation that's resulted from quarantine, has caused a reemergence of previously managed anxieties to come about, causing people to experience rather distressing anxiety symptoms.
The pandemic has made people less social, especially in-person interactions. So this is pretty much without precedent in our modern history. So how do you think all that impacts sex, health, and erections?
So I think the social impact of the pandemic is going to have a particular impact on partnered sexual activity and erections in a partnered setting. For people who have been dating and were not able to connect with a partner during the pandemic or were not able to establish a relationship, getting back out there can be anxiety-provoking. For people who are in relationships, living on top of each other, being in quarantine for many months, even more than a year at this point, can create all kinds of tensions that can negatively impact the sexual relationship. The other way that the pandemic is having an impact on sexual health and erections in particular is the way many men are relating to pornography. Because of the isolation, because for many men the inability to access a partner or distress in the relationship that they find themselves in, turning to porn likely has become more common and has become a likely way that men are expressing their sexuality. What that means for how men continue to relate to pornography and relate to potential partners in the future is yet to be determined, but we shall see as events unfold.
What if the recovery from the pandemic ends up being a little slower than we had hoped for? What would you tell folks dealing with those fears that we might just one day be back where we started?
That's a great question. It's a difficult thing to think about. It's difficult even for me to think about. I wish I had the right words to help somebody through that and to help somebody through that fear. What I do believe, and I think what keeps me grounded, is that we are very resilient as human beings. And no doubt there has been tremendous loss and tremendous upheaval to our lives resulting from this pandemic. And we will, as a collective, emerge from this. And I ground on that belief that people will survive and will be able to grow and become stronger, whether the pandemic is coming to an end now or whether there is a resurgence. At some point, we will figure out how to beat this pandemic back and will be stronger in the end of it.
Is there anything that comes to your mind about what are some really high level and top pieces of advice you might give to a couple right now that is looking to emerge stronger from this pandemic?
So for couples who have been able to strengthen their relationship, I would say keep doing what you're doing. For couples who are struggling in their relationship, first and foremost, it's important to understand that this will end, and this is not the sum total of your relationship. If the issues that you're struggling with have emerged during the pandemic, if one or both of you are experiencing financial setbacks, struggles with parenting, fears, anxieties, concerns about the future, that's completely understandable, and it is not emblematic of your relationship. So first and foremost, couples need to keep things in the broader context of what is happening, the broader context that we are in a pandemic. If couples are struggling with their relationship or with their sexuality, I would say that they should not hesitate to reach out for help. Help has never been more accessible. With telehealth and the general societal emphasis on mental health and well-being, getting to a provider and taking care of things earlier on in the process can be extremely helpful and can not only help to prevent some of the negative direction that your relationship has taken, but it can really help to strengthen and make your relationship thrive.
Mark, if there's anything else that you think would be helpful for our audience to hear about regarding our topic today, please let us know before we wrap up this interview.
This has been a very difficult year, and it doesn't feel like we are at the end of this. And the ramifications of this pandemic will be felt for a while. There's no question about that. But relationships can and will emerge stronger. How you frame this time period between you and your partner, how you define it, what you take away from it, can make a real difference in terms of how strong your relationship will emerge or if it will struggle.
Thanks for listening to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. For more information on today's topic and understanding how the mind impacts erectile dysfunction, please visit erectioniq.com. That's erectioniq.com.